there's so many different healing modalities out there. It was only a matter of time before we got to sexual healing. Today on the podcast, I'm talking with Destiny Holley. She is a sacred sexual healing coach, registered nurse, and has been practicing sacred sexual healing for a number of years now. Really excited to talk to her about this subject. Not something I'm uncomfortable talking about, but just not a subject that I've given myself a lot of opportunities to openly discuss. So I'm really excited to talk with her about her journey and how she is helping humanity by helping us understand that pleasure is okay. I hope you enjoy the conversation. We'll see you on the other side. All right, welcome back to our show. Today on Journey of the Modern Yogi, I'm sitting with a brand new friend. So I've literally just met you physically. We've talked via email, social media, things like that. And I was you were brought into my field of knowing by a mutual friend who's more of a, like, I think she's a good friend of yours. She's a person that works at a place that I like to frequent, and she's extremely friendly. And so every time we go in, we have the best conversations. She's an amazing artist. Her name's Natalie. And so Natalie, when I went in to get coffee one day, was like, you got to talk to this girl, Destiny. She's doing some cool shit. She's an amazing healer. I know you got a podcast. You should talk to her. I'm like, cool, give me her number, give me her name, Instagram handle. I think that day I went home and I'm like, hey, Destiny, this is random, but here's me. I met this person. She knows you. We should talk. And so thank you so much for being here. But Destiny is a sex, love, and relationship coach. And so in our healing journeys, there are very many different modalities that we can approach to find healing. And some could say that maybe we should try multiple different modalities to find the healing that works for us. And I think in the West, especially in the West, there's a lot of misunderstanding about sex, love, and the way relationships manifest. Myself, I grew up on pornography. I was a young child that found the internet at a young age and quickly found those sex sites and it took me a long time to really understand what love was, because what the love, quote unquote love, I was shown was very abusive at times, very dramatic. There was really no love involved in pornography, right? And so that was one of my earliest introductions into sexuality. And it took me a very long time before I finally understood that that wasn't what relationships were. And many, many destroyed relationships in the path. But there's also, so for a little while, once I finally found out that I was addicted to porn and I was doing something that wasn't serving me as a human being, I demonized sex. It was like, so I went the whole other way and went from embracing like all sex that you can get to, no, this is not good, asceticism almost, of like, I'm going to be celibate for a while. And that didn't really work either, right? And so it's finding healthy balances. And so finding somebody like yourself who helps people, guide them to find healthy balances and to respect the love and to respect the sexuality that we hold as humans. Like, we're sexual beings. Like, it's okay to be part of that, right? It's okay to embrace that in our humanity. And I feel that a lot of us, and I'll speak again from self-experience, we get in our own ways with that stuff. And we start to shame ourselves and we guilt ourselves for feeling pleasure or feeling arousal or something like that. And then that starts this whole other trauma thing that we have to unwind as we start to get older and embrace that sexuality. So thank you for doing the work that you do. I'm so excited to talk with you about this subject and to find more amazing modalities for healing that might not be so much on the forefront, by no means on the fringe, but things that need to happen. So thank you. Thank you for being here.
Wow, Adam, thank you so much for having me here today with you. It's so beautiful to be here talking about my absolute favorite subject, and of course in the company of so many other amazing healing modalities that you share here on your podcast. You just shared so much juicy information with me, and I just want to thank you for just immediately opening up and sharing your journey through porn and through aestheticism and what that's looked like for you. And I'm sure there are so many people who can resonate with that journey, especially those who have found themselves on what they would see as a more spiritual path. It's sort of, as we were talking about before the podcast began, a lot of times when we get on the spiritual path, there's this idea that we need to release everything attached to the ego and to desire and to pleasure in a lot of ways, and to really sort of renounce our human needs and desires and attachments. And I think a lot of people, as we're seeing sort of the rise of interest in reclaiming the feminine, and when I say the feminine, I mean slowness and pleasure and connection and heart and soul, in the ways that we're interacting in the world. There's a big movement towards reclaiming that. And with that is sort of the release of this notion that the ego is something bad and something to be renounced and something to be overcome. So I'm so excited to be here with you today and to be talking about how embracing our sexuality and our pleasure and our desires in a conscious way can actually be a very beautiful path to deepening your spirituality.
Oh, most definitely. It's funny. I didn't even plan on sharing that part. One of the things I've been working on in my personal self and my spiritual journey is listening to my intuition. So two things happened today that I had no expectation of. One was when we first met, like we came into our room and getting ready for the podcast, we're having a great conversation. And you said, hey, do you mind if we do a little ecstatic dance just to like shake things up? And so again, I'm listening to my intuition. I've been working on that. I was going to say in the right before we hit record, I was going to explain the whole process of ecstatic dance to you. I've never ecstatic danced. Never once. I'm very conservative about my movements, and I feel very self-conscious about that. And I have since I was a child. I grew up and I was a heavy-set child, and so I was very self-conscious about how I presented myself, how I was presented. And so for you to suggest that, my initial reaction was like, nah, I'll be out there. But immediately I'm like, yes, of course, that's great. Love that. And it's embracing that moment. And because there's that ego part of me is like, Adam, you're a terrible dancer. What the hell's wrong with you? Why would you ever do that? But this consciousness of me had held my ego and said, hey, no, it's cool. Why don't we try something different? This person has no idea who you are. They don't know if you dance or not. They don't know if you're like the best dancer or the worst dancer. Their eyes are probably going to be closed while they're dancing, and so are yours, right? So it was this beautiful split-second conversation I had with myself to make my ego feel safe, but let my consciousness take over, right? And so that was so beautiful. So thank you for like just opening up with shattering all the shields I had put up that I never do, right? And the second is talking about pornography. That's something that I've shared with people that I felt needed to hear that somebody else is going through that or has gone through that. But that's been a very individual conversation. And so, for me to put that in the opening of my podcast with you, I've felt very vulnerable talking about that. But at the same time, it's something that I feel a lot of us experience, especially at a young age, which is unfortunate. And so when we normalize stuff like this, we don't feel so helpless, right? So that we're the only one going through this thing, right? And that's one of the things I've noticed about my spiritual journey is that if you're going through something, somebody else is going through a similar variation of that as well. So finding the help that you need, and by finding that help, sometimes it's putting it out there that there's help needed. So that pornography thing for me, as although it's very far in my past, it's still something like drinking, right? It still pops up at times. It says, hey, Adam, www. Right? You can just go see whatever you want. And then there's the conscious side of me that's like, well, what's that going to serve? It's not just immediate no, right? Is there an intention for that? Because I'm not demonizing pornography. There's a healthy way to observe pornography and to help that in whatever relationship that you have. But there's also that way that it can suck you in and make you feel like that's reality. And then that's where the disconnect happens. And then we disembody from ourselves when we're in relationships, and we treat our people that we're in relationships with like a thing instead of part of us, who we are. And so like I feel that's a very important thing for me to understand. So thank you for holding the space for me to share that.
Wow, Adam, yes, I am celebrating you so much in doing your first ecstatic dance right before popping on your podcast. And that really takes a lot of bravery, I think, to just jump right into moving your body with this weird music that I put on, this total stranger,
Yeah.
or let's say new
New
friend
friend. There you go. Exactly.
who is in your space. And yeah, I just want to celebrate you for being open and receptive to that. And not that you asked, but I think that your dancing was just beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Thank
My
you.
eyes were closed a lot of the time.
And I think there's an air of the person that you're with, right? And again, we've just met, but there's our intuition talks a lot, right? It tells us a lot of stuff, and it has a lot of information. And the information that I got when you walked in my door and gave me a hug, and then gave my mother a hug because my mom's here helping us move, which was beautiful. It's like, all right, this person is right on the level that you need to be on, right? This person is energetically matched up. You have a lot of similarities, clearly, because you're having a conversation. But there was this immediate oh, Destiny. Oh, it's like we should know each other. I feel like we do know each other, And so there's this immediate calmness. So I feel like you probably share that similar demeanor unknowingly with your clients, which starts to break down that maybe that wall, that barrier that a lot of people have up around the subject of sexuality, and allows them to, this person gets me. Cool, I can have a conversation with this human and not feel judged, and feel heard, and feel loved, and feel accepted. And then we're going to walk this path to find balance. So, good on you. That's just like a natural aura about you.
Thank you so much, Adam. It really means a lot to hear you say that.
So, no, please go ahead.
Yeah, and I would also go to say that you're exactly right. So much of working in the field of sacred sexuality and applying that to the way that we relate with others and with ourselves is about bringing love and acceptance to all of our desires and to all of our humanity. And the most base, most primal aspect of that is our sexuality. And just as it relates to what you were mentioning about pornography, I think I love that you brought up that there are healthy ways that you can interact with pornography, because we're not here to demonize pornography at all.
Definitely.
But it's more just to build an awareness of the fact that we live in a culture that doesn't teach us very much about our sexuality. We don't learn, a vast majority of us are not learning how to engage sexually with other people in conscious ways. We're not learning how to pleasure ourselves in conscious ways. In fact, oftentimes we're being told that that's absolutely not okay,
Right.
that that's shameful, and that that's bad. And so a lot of us, our first real glimpse into sexuality, which is a very natural curiosity of any child, of any adolescent, is pornography. And pornography has actually become one of the first places that people learn what it is to be sexual with another person. And so, it's really challenging to be in a culture where that's where the majority of our learning is coming from, and a majority of pornography doesn't talk about what it means to love another person,
Right.
what it is to be in a conscious relationship, what it is to give a full fuck yes consent to your body, and so that's really the challenge that we run into with pornography, is that it can portray sexuality in a way that doesn't honor the full human spirit and desire.
Right.
It really only portrays most of the time sort of this physical act that really is the end product of this culmination of interrelating and love and anxiety and all of these things that go into two people coming to a place where they want to be sexual with each other. So yeah, I think that using that as a bridge into, viewing our sexuality from the time that we're in the womb to the time that we're babies to the time that we're children to adolescence as beautiful and pure and innocent, and not as something that should be shameful or demonized or repressed. And that's sadly where our culture has gone in its treatment of sexuality so far. And so a lot of the work that I'm doing, and that so many other people who are working in the field of sacred sexuality are doing, is bringing the innocence and the purity and the sacredness of sexuality back to the forefront and saying, here we are, we're human, we're in bodies that want to experience pleasure and connection and beauty and orgasm, and we want to experience that with ourselves and with other people, and not to feel like we're bad or shameful or going to be excommunicated or burned at the stake,
Right.
or all of these other things and ways that people have been punished for expressing themselves.
You mentioned innocence and joy, and that's so one of the things that really stood out to me when I first started my spiritual journey was reading about some of the folks that have quote unquote reached some kind of ascension or some kind of level of understanding of whatever it is. And the people that come into mind right off the bat are like a Mother Teresa type person, Dalai Lama, Gandhi, these people that have found ways to embrace the fullness of life and understand that the balance is there, right? And figuring that out. And one of the things that I noticed about a lot of these people is that when you reach whatever people said that they have reached, like I highly doubt if you asked Mother Teresa when she was alive, is like, do you think you're an ascended being? She's like, no, I just help people. Just have a good heart, They have this childlike joy about them because everything is awe and wonder. Everything is like, oh my God, look at this plant. It's green. Holy cow. It's got look at those leaves. They're so long and green and amazing. And there's a brown one too. That's beautiful as well, And finding this utter joy and amazement in the world that's around them. And I think that sexuality is part of that, right? Because there is joy and amazement around discovering sexuality, discovering how fun it is to find pleasure and to be okay with the pleasure that you find. And so finding the balance of life where if we spend our whole lives in pleasure, right, that's a way to go, but you're still a householder. There's still responsibilities you have, right? But if you just focus all on your responsibilities, where's the fun? Where do you find joy in life? So this is an opportunity to find that balance and joy throughout all of your life. Respecting the organs you have, respecting the desires that you have, knowing that outside of biological stuff, where we just procreate to help the human race, move on, which is biology, there is a way to enjoy sex and to use that as a stress relief, an anxiety relief, a connection with a human being, a connection with yourself, right? And if we demonize connections, which again, in the West, we may have set out to do that or inadvertently did it, but we've done it. Where I think there's a lot of people that are understanding that now that are trying to backtrack and say, okay, no, it's okay. Like yourself, like it's okay to have fun. It's okay to touch yourself. It's okay to take a mirror down to your genitals and look at yourself, right? What does your butt look like? What does my testicles look like? What does your labia look like, right? Look at your body. Like I look at my toes all the time, right? Kill up my toenails. I know what my bunions feel like. But if you don't know what your testicles feel like, that's a huge part of you, right? You go to the bathroom multiple times a day. If you're not observing what's going on down there, then you're ostracizing a part of your body, right? So the work that you're doing, how did you step into this? Because this seems like it's a very courageous thing to step towards, especially to offer to public. It's one thing for me to understand this, to understand my body and my own personal, but then to get to a point to where you're offering this to humanity, I applaud you because that's so brave, because this is such a taboo type subject for a lot of us, but you found a way to find confidence in it and say, you know what, I'm gonna charge forward and help humanity. So what was that? What were those steps for you?
Well, I would love to respond to just this idea of restoring joy and wonder to our sexual experiences. And there's just so much in that, because that is so crucial and sort of at the core of what it is to practice sacred sexuality. And it's really about restoring a sense of wonder and curiosity about your body and about your sexuality and about the body and sexuality and desires of anyone else that you're relating with. And so the way that this really applies to what I do in helping people create these beautiful, conscious, divine unions within themselves, and then being able to share that in a beautiful, conscious, epic relationship with another human, it really is restoring that sense of joy and wonder and awe that you have a body that gets to feel and gets to be in pleasure and maybe even sometimes is in pain and doesn't feel good and experiences sadness and grief and anger, and it's restoring joy and awe and wonder to all of that, to all of those emotions, not just the pleasure and the bliss and the happiness, but what is it to be human and to fully show up for whatever we're feeling and experiencing at any given moment, whether that is joy or pleasure or an ecstatic orgasm, or whether that's just the deepest sadness and anxiety and fear and desire to be loved. And being able to hold that with love and acceptance and to say, wow, it's so beautiful that I get to feel this, and to love yourself through any of those feelings. So often our natural response, due to many of the way that we've been raised, in our culture, is to push away those feelings or to feel even deeper shame. Oh, I feel angry. Oh, I feel frustrated. Oh, that's terrible. I'm a bad person now because I feel angry and frustrated. And it's saying, no, like how normal, how natural, how beautiful is it that I'm experiencing these feelings? And when we can restore that sense of joy and wonder and awe to our own experience, our own emotions, we can start to experience that in the same way with our partner, with anyone who shows up in our lives. We can see our partner going through something, feeling angry, feeling frustrated, going through grief, and we can say, "You're beautiful. What you're feeling is beautiful, and I'm here for you, and I accept that in myself, and I accept that in you too." And when we can get to that place, that is just the deepest intimacy. That is just the deepest love that we can feel for another person, to be in full acceptance and love of their experience. And there's a beautiful word for this that I love, that's amor fati, and it is to be in love with your fate, in love with whatever it is to be, in love with whatever the current experience is.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, and wow. So that really is just at the core of the work that I do, and you're absolutely right that it was a bit of a whirlwind to get into this path, and it was a difficult path for me to step into. And you know this, Adam, but I have been a nurse for 9 years or so, and I've worked in mother-baby care, caring for mothers and their newborns after birth, and that's been really rewarding. And I've also worked in trauma surgery units, helping people recover after they've gone through these really traumatic injuries. And
so you've brought life into this world, and then you've helped people hold on to the life that they've. Oh my gosh, good for you. That's a heart.
And that's been, I think that doing that work really prepared me to be present with whatever is happening, and to sort of be present and recognize the extremes of what's happening. We are born and we live and we play and we cry and we fuck and we die, and it's all beautiful and it's all a part of this. And so, I've been doing the nursing thing, and I still go back and do that, and it's something that I enjoy, but there are very much ways that I can't show up to help people as a nurse that I desperately want to help people. And just in my own healing journey, it started out very much with, how can I step into the fullest version of myself, and asking the question of who am I? So I started my spiritual journey very much asking, who am I? There's got to be more to this. I think I philosophized myself into deep anxiety and depression about this at some point, and it sort of led to this whole starting over, just letting go of everything I thought that I knew, letting go of the job, letting go of the house, letting go of a relationship that I had my first love, basically.
Okay.
Letting go of all of that and sort of stepping into this greater question of who am I without all the stories of what the world has told me to be? Who am I without all of the cultural imprinting that I've received, that my sexuality is bad, that my emotions are bad, that my body is bad, that my body is undesirable? Who am I without all of that cultural imprinting? And so I started out on that journey, and I have danced with different plant medicines that have helped me to come into greater realization. I've been assisted so greatly by psilocybin, which has really opened my perspective and allowed me to sort of see my life and my stories from this higher place. Stepping into a greater awareness of where the stories that I hold are. And it was while I was on this journey and traveling, and I was actually at an intentional community, a beautiful place called Gaia Yoga on the Big Island in Hawaii. And it's an intentional community there where they're learning to redesign life in a way that embraces our bodies and our humanity, that sort of returns us to more tribal living, more interconnection, more heart-centered focus. It's teaching people how to work with the land through permaculture principles. And this community had a lot of leaders, and a lot of its fundamental teachings and beliefs were influenced by sacred sexuality. And Tantra. And so I was first introduced to Tantra and sacred sexuality when I was at this community in Hawaii. And this was a transformational experience for me. I went there and I was deeply immersed in some teachings that they shared with me. And I was able to meet the first sexual healing practitioner that I had ever encountered in my life. And her name is Xanadu, and she's an amazing healer and shamaness, and has just given me so much. And she was the first person who heard my story, heard all of the things that I had been through, struggling in my first relationship, with being inorgasmic, basically believing that I wasn't able to orgasm, and also really struggling to feel connected and to feel loved. I just, for so much of the earlier part of my life, I was so closed to love that even when others were wanting to give it to me, I could not receive it because I did not believe that I was worthy of love. And so any pleasure that wanted to come to me, any love that wanted to come to me, any ability to ask for something that I might desire was not available to me because I had this huge ceiling and this huge limiting belief that I wasn't worthy of any of these things. So after speaking with this shamaness here in Hawaii, she was the first one to tell me, to look me in the eyes and say, you're going to be a sacred sexuality healer. Like this is a part of your path.
What was your response at that time?
I thought she was crazy.
You're talking to Destiny, right?
I thought she was crazy. I thought it sounded fantastic. I was like, people don't really do that. I don't know. And she gifted me my first book on Tantra, and it was titled Sex Magic, the Shaman Method of Sexual Healing.
Oh, all right. That's going on my list.
Yes, and it was amazing, and I just consumed it, and I just did all the practices, and I fell in love with myself and my body, and I was learning about the chakra system and developing a relationship with my inner masculine and feminine, and learning about all of the programming that I had received, through growing up in Texas and in the Bible Belt, and all of the religious programming that I had received about my desires being wrong, and about original sin, and about the body basically just being a sinful in nature.
Right.
And so I started to undo all of this, and I was working with her, and then after I left Hawaii, I continued my studies, and I started diving deep into personal work. I went into a coaching program through the Health Coach Institute, Health and Life Coach, and I had been practicing Tantra and sacred sexuality on my own.
Okay.
This, just like you said, this was my personal practice. This wasn't anything that I
wasn't going out there on soapboxes yet.
I was thinking I was going to go out and try to help other people with. This was a very private affair. And during that time that I was doing that, I was healing sort of from this first relationship that I had, and finding out all of the ways that I was limiting myself and limiting my ability to feel pleasure and connect with other people. And in that time that I was studying this, this is a vulnerable share, but I feel like it's impactful, so I always share this. I actually encountered sexual abuse as I was studying the path of Tantra. It wasn't in relation to any of my teachers. It was with a partner that I had at the time.
Okay.
And this was ongoing for a few months. And at the end of this relationship, basically it was another just huge reassessment of how I was being in my life and how I was being in relationship. And there were these patterns that I found where I still wasn't expressing my truth, and I still wasn't listening to my body, and I was still sort of stuck in this like, well, I exist to please other people, and I exist to meet the needs of other people. And in my journey, a lot of that has roots in codependency and feeling like I need to be what another person wants in order to receive love. And if I'm not that thing, then I'm not lovable.
Right.
And so it was an initiation.
Yeah.
I came to find out after I dove deep into sacred sexuality and Tantra, and it really pulled me out of this black hole that I was going to after this very traumatic event.
Yeah.
And I remember doing rituals. I remember doing a ritual with some of my dear, dear woman friends where I actually had my IUD removed, sitting in sacred ceremony with a group of my sisters as a symbol of I'm no longer going to relate to my sexuality in this sort of unconscious way. Using it as a means to get love, using it as a means to feel validated in a relationship, not honoring my body. And to me, that just, having this IUD in, that was sort of representing I can have sex with whoever I want and the consequences are pretty low. That's honestly what it came to represent to me. Yeah. And so I had this IUD removed, and I went through a 9 months of celibacy.
Okay.
And during that time, I was going deep into my own tantric and sacred sexuality practices, into my self-love practices. I went through a beautiful self-marriage ceremony out on some of the islands close to Salt Spring Island in Canada.
Yeah.
And I sort of cut all the cords with this past version of me who wasn't honoring myself and seeing my body as a temple and seeing my sexuality as sacred. And I really decided that I was going to relate with myself first and foremost differently. I was going to be loving to myself. I was going to listen to myself and honor my body and go slowly with my sexuality. And that was a huge turning point for me in the way that I began to relate with people. And from this place where I had reclaimed my connection to my sexuality as sacred, and my yeses and my nos as sacred. And I learned what a yes feels like in my body, and I learned what a no feels like in my body. From this place, I started to realize how important this work really was, how crucial this work really was, especially knowing that the experience that I went to is shared by so many women. So many women go through sexual abuse and trauma. And also so many women, even if they haven't been through sexual abuse, are living in relationships where they don't feel like they have the space to express their desires or their needs for love and connection and pleasure. So many women are relating with their sexuality as if their sexuality exists for oftentimes a male partner.
Yes, I do agree with that.
And it is very unfortunate, because I guarantee that both any genders are going to enjoy their sexuality more when each person is connected to their own body and their own pleasure. And so it's not as connected of an experience when we aren't in tune with what our desires are.
Right.
And sharing those with our partner.
Yeah.
And so this was just my initiation, and after going through all of this healing and doing all of this work for myself and seeing my own transformation and seeing myself step into relating with other people in such a honest, vulnerable, tender, but also powerful.
Yeah.
And consensual way, and seeing how the quality of the people I was attracting into my life improved, seeing how the quality of my sexual experiences improved, and just overall feeling so much trust. That was one of the biggest things, Adam, was after going through this, I felt a trust in myself that I would show up for myself in a way that I'd never experienced before.
And that's got to be something that, I mean, that confidence and that trust, that's something that you don't realize you don't have until you find it. It's like, oh man, this whole time. That's, and I have to say, I really commend you there. Sometimes when we find trauma in our lives, whether it's on a journey or not, that trauma can really derail us, from the path that we're on. So for you to experience trauma around your sexuality when you're finding and embracing your sexuality, and then still using that as information to come in, okay, so that was the wrong kind of love I'm looking for, the wrong kind of sexuality I'm looking for. But I'm not just going to say, I'm throwing up my hands, I've done it wrong again, fuck it, I'm just going to be celibate. It's just information that came in and said, okay, not that. If not that, then this, right? So now I know what I don't want. I know the triggers, I know the signs, I know the information. Now let's move that towards something that I know intrinsically, that gnosis of inside of me, that I know I'm going to move towards something more healthy. So I commend you for that, because that can derail anybody, especially a sexual trauma, So that's so empowering for people to hear. I hope that people really understand the gravity of that statement that you made, that story that you're vulnerable enough to share. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
There is one thing I want to just kind of dive back into real quick. You had mentioned something a little while back about sitting with sensations and our inabilities to sit with sensations. And that's a concept that came to me not even a year ago. We started doing medicine men's circles right around the summertime, June-ish. And so the idea was have groups of men come in to do men's work. And through that, we're going to sit with some plant medicines also. And so we would sit with Sananga, Hape. So Sananga is like an eye drop from the Amazon that is meant for clearing out your, so the warriors and the hunters would used to use it before they would go hunt or go to war. And they pour this drop in their eyes, and it burns like you've never felt before. And there's levels of burning. There's low, medium, and high. And if you've ever put anything burning in your eyes, you know that if you rub your eyes, it just gets worse. And so the idea is you put this drops in your eyes, it clears out the untrue story, the falseness, and it activates your third eye. So when you go into your battle or when you go to hunt, you can see completely clear and you're guided by your spirit. But the other side of that is, how do you sit without touching your eyes when your eyes are on fire? sit with that sensation, right? Understand how to sit with intense pain, intense intensity, right? Intense sensations. And the same thing with with pleasure, right? It's hard for a lot of us to sit with intense pleasure, to feel unconditional love, right? To feel like an elongated orgasm, to feel that pleasure of like, oh my God, like I don't know what to do with my body anymore. There's just so much happening, right? And so from both ends of the spectrum, from intense pain and suffering to intense pleasure, we just don't know we don't know what to do with that stuff, right? And so the journeys with myself in plant medicines, Hape I mentioned earlier, Hape is a nasally ingested tobacco product, and even psilocybin, where you have these waves of emotions, like sometimes dramatic waves and shifts of elation to depression, of figuring things out to total confusion, you know? And really embracing that full spectrum of human emotions and knowing that you can go from here to there, and that doesn't mean here is bad and there is better, you know, here is good and there is good. It's the balance of here and there, you know? And so the work that with the sexual work, you know, to introduce pleasures and even some kind of pains into our bodies in a pleasurable type of way is so healthy, to find what our bodies can really do with whatever sensations that we have. But I think also giving somebody else trust in that they're going to hold that space for you, and they're going to listen to you, see your body, see the reactions, and then act accordingly. You know, and that's such a beautiful trust, because a lot of people don't have that with themselves, let alone with a partner. So that work that you're doing is, I mean, I can only imagine that it's just beginning to unravel a lot of the falseness that we've been raised on, you know, the sexual, you know, the masculine versus feminine. You know, a lot of guys that I know just embrace that masculinity and don't have any space for femininity. But when we look at archetypes, we embrace both masculine and feminine archetypes. I'm not a male recognizing as a male, so I only have masculine archetypes. No, there's a huntress and a goddess in there. There's a priestess and a lover in there. You know, they're all in there waiting for balance, you know? So, so thank you for that. I just had a tangent on that real quick.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that that's such a beautiful place to go, because when you're talking about being able to sit with sensations, you know, a lot of times we feel like that could come off as a very masculine trait. And a lot of times what's really needed to be able to sit with a sensation, whether that sensation is this painful, stinging liquid in your eyes, or whether that sensation is the cusp of an orgasm, really there has to be surrender. There has to be an ability to surrender to and accept that sensation, and just coming back to it. That what needs to happen in order for that surrender to take place is a trust that you are going to be able to experience this, and that you're going to be okay. You know, I think for a lot of women who struggle with orgasm, they talk about getting just to the edge and then feeling like they just can't let go. They just can't let go once they get to that edge of that orgasm. And so it can actually become a painful sensation, an uncomfortable sensation. And a lot of the work that I do around helping women feel into different sensations and to become multi-orgasmic and to allow more pleasure into their experience is around developing that sense of trust in the body and that ability to surrender and let go. And just like you're saying, it's really a dance between embodying that inner divine feminine, which can surrender and let go, and in which is so full of love and trust and connection and experience. But a lot of times, in order for us to truly be able to surrender into that feminine flow, we need that masculine essence. We need that trust that someone is watching the gate while we're surrendering into this utter mind obliterating ecstasy, that someone is there keeping the fire burning so that we're going to stay warm and we're not going to freeze through a long night. And so having that masculine sort of guarding the door and holding that sword, saying, "You're safe. I am going to protect you. You're safe to experience this sensation because I'm here for you and I've got you." And so much of that has to do with working around consent and boundaries, being able to listen to your body and say no when something doesn't feel aligned with what you want. And a lot of women come to me wanting to embody their divine feminine more because we are starting to understand that being too much in our masculine energy and in our mind and having to have controlling and all of these things all the time doesn't allow for us to really relax into pleasure and connection and love and juiciness, but it's still we still need that masculine. And so the secret, if you will, to experiencing that pleasure isn't just totally closing out your masculine. A lot of time it's actually strengthening that masculine and getting that masculine to understand what's needed so that you can surrender into that flow.
Okay.
And so a lot of that, a lot of the work that I do around feminine embodiment as it pertains to achieving orgasm or unlocking your orgasmic energy is actually getting in touch with and healing a wound that exists between an inner masculine and feminine, actually strengthening that internal masculine. A lot of times whenever the feminine isn't able to relax and surrender, it's because she doesn't feel safe with her own internal masculine. So a lot of the work is around strengthening and coming into beautiful divine union internally with that divine masculine.
That's beautiful. Do you mainly work with women, or do you work co-ed, or with masculine and feminine?
I primarily have worked with women.
Okay.
And just recently I've started working with couples, which is so juicy and beautiful and rewarding for me because I am and have always been obsessed with love, and I love to see other people experiencing love and beauty with each other, and it really warms my heart. So to get to play a part in helping two people connect deeper is so nourishing for me. But that goes for just individuals too. It's like seeing a woman go from a place of rejecting their own body, rejecting their own emotions, rejecting their own experiences, to full acceptance and admiration and love is so beautiful. And really it's a journey into wholeness. It's a journey into accepting the full range of who we are. And through that acceptance, being able to see clearly where we want to go.
Love that. So is it like a session that you have with clients? Is it like an ongoing, do you have usually 2 to 3 sessions with a client, or is it how does a session work, I guess, is what I'm trying to get to. With myself, I practice Reiki, sound healing, very different, but still healing modalities in their own right. And, there are ways that, for example, with Reiki, you can go from step A to step B to step C, and you can do the thing, or you can do it intuitively. Not right or wrong, it's wherever you're at. But with the healing modality that you're practicing, what does a healing session look like? Or is it multiple sessions?
So the way that I've been doing things in order to create the most profound experience and the most real lasting change in the way that we relate is I do an extended container.
Okay.
And so I really ask that if we enter into a transformational container together, we're agreeing to at least 3 months or 90 days of doing this work together. And that's because research has found that it takes about 21 days at minimum to really create lasting transformation and change in the way that we believe, in the way that we act. And so basically in my program, we go into a lot of tantra, we go into a lot of sacred sexuality, but there's a lot that I do within my work is very science-based. And I think that that comes from my nursing background and being in the medical field and really valuing evidence-based research. I think that there is a place for that, even as we step into spiritual healing. There's a place for utilizing what we know about the human brain and about the human nervous system to create the most lasting change.
Definitely.
And so it takes about 21 days of doing these practices and these affirmations and meeting regularly to really create a new story for yourself and a new way of relating with yourself and with other people. So, so minimum of 90 days. So usually we enter into a 3-month container, and that 3-month container is I have 2 options.
Okay.
It's either the Awaken Your Inner Sex Goddess program that I do for women specifically who are wanting to experience deeper pleasure, deeper self-connection, heal from past wounds, whether that's something like codependency or sexual trauma, and really reclaim their own sexual wholeness and pleasure in their body. And this really is great for women who are single in particular, because it really sets them up to be ready and able to enter into a conscious relationship after going through this program, a relationship that's going to honor them and meet them in the same ways that they now can honor and meet themselves. Right. And so we don't focus, and it's not necessarily about attracting your soulmate or your conscious partner, but that's a beautiful side effect, totally. I would say, of awakening your inner sex goddess. And then the other program that I've recently started offering is the Divine Union Awakening. And so this is for couples who either have had challenges around communication or feeling fulfilled in their partnership, who have had challenges through their sexuality. This is a container that they can basically come and learn practices and techniques through, and this is similar to methodology that's in the Awaken Your Inner Sex Goddess program, but we incorporate breath work. We incorporate a top-down method of mindfulness, which means that we're becoming aware of what thoughts, feelings, and sensations we're having in the body. We work with somatic experiencing. So we're feeling, where are you keeping anger or fear or tension in your body, and what does that have to tell you? What is that trying to tell you, and what changes can we make to help you create that safety and that trust that you need to be able to relax and enjoy juicy pleasure and epic love and connection. And so both of these containers utilize similar methodologies. It's a blend of somatic experiencing, breath work, neurolinguistic programming, which is helping us sort of rewire the way that we think about ourselves and what we're worthy of and what's available to us. And they're both minimum 90-day containers, and my recommendation is to do the extended program, which is a 6-month container, which allows us to go a lot deeper into the work. Wow. I've received a lot of feedback from my clients that it's so full in the 90 days, and there's so much to the practices and a good deal of integration needed. And so I've actually extended those containers for those who want to go deeper and experience more through those. So the Awaken Your Inner Sex Goddess program for single women looking to deepen their relationship with themselves and their sexuality, and the Divine Union Awakening for couples wishing to come into a more conscious co-creation and experience the deepest love available to them and really step into the most beautiful relationship and sexual experiences together that they can imagine.
Yes. And that self-trust, I think that doesn't get enough credit. I mean, you've given it definitely enough credit from your side, but I think in general, that doesn't get enough credit to be as important as it should be. Because when we really do, when we can trust ourselves, it allows us to trust others deeper, you know. And the example that was given to me a while back was, it was very simple, very basic. It's like telling yourself you're going to go to the gym. Like, I'm going to go to the gym later today. Later today comes around and I think of every excuse not to go to the gym, and then I don't. And I just do whatever instead. And it seems frivolous, seems meaningless, but you've just lied to yourself. You told yourself earlier, hey, I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to do some stuff. And then when the time came, you decided not to. So if deep down you can't trust yourself to hold yourself accountable for the promises you've made to yourself, how do you deeply trust somebody else? You know, and that's something that, like, that's a very deep non-understanding that a lot of people have, and I think has shown up a lot with, you know, subjects around like universal basic income, or things, even the stimulus checks that were sent out for COVID. I trust that I'm going to do something wholesome and good with my money, but I don't trust that you will. I think you're going to sit on the couch and watch Netflix all day long and just get fucked up, right? Mm-hmm. And that's that distrust that we have, you know, because we don't really trust ourselves. And so, you know, the more work that we can do around that self-trust, for me right now, it's meditation. You know, meditation has created a lot of self-trust in me because, you know, with meditation, a lot of people don't know this. People didn't tell me this when I started meditating, but when you sit with yourself for long enough, this mirror starts to slide in front of your face that shows you all the things that you dislike about yourself. And once you see those things, you have two options: run away from it or do some damn work. And if you don't do the work and you run away, you now consciously know that you're moving away from something you should be moving towards, and that affects your body differently. So the trust that we can create in the relationships intrinsically gives us that trust in others. And that's so beautiful. I appreciate that work so much. Like, that's an unsung hero of work right there.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Adam.
Yeah.
And I just want to add to what you're saying, that this trust is really foundational and pivotal to being able to show up and experience joy and pleasure and connection with other people. And it also doesn't come overnight. You know, if there are people out there who are struggling with accountability and procrastination, things that I've definitely still struggle with, you know, from time to time, this doesn't mean that it's impossible for you to trust yourself. You know, self-trust is a process, and it really can happen just one little thing at a time. You know, saying that you are going to read in the evening or meditate in the evening instead of watching Netflix this one day, or that you're going to, you know, you're going to prepare a home-cooked meal with whole foods. You know, it doesn't have to be something radical all at once. It really happens through small, consistent steps. And actually, this is the best way to build real change. You know, if you try to change everything all at once, and you have struggled with a to-do list, or you've struggled to be accountable to things, the answer isn't necessarily to say, all right, I'm going to do these 20 things tomorrow. No, like, start where you're at. And it's really important as we go through this journey to be able to practice that self-acceptance and self-forgiveness for when we do fall short, because we inevitably do. We're human. Sometimes things don't go according to plan. Sometimes we get headaches, or we don't feel good, or there's like a legitimate reason for why we don't do something that we said we can do. But if we can get to a place where majority of the time we're doing what we say we will do, we can build such a deep trust in ourselves. And just like you said, having that trust in ourselves is going to allow us to trust other people to show up for us, yes, but also to trust that if they don't, that we're going to be fine. And we've got it. We've got ourselves. Like, other people showing up for us is like this beautiful bonus, because we are so solid and so trusting of ourselves to do that work.
Hell yeah. Hell yes, definitely. That, when that, oh gosh, I can't talk enough about trust. That is such a beautiful thing. And, we talked earlier before we actually hit record about the ego. And that's another one of those trust exercises. The ego is part of us. We talk a lot about destroying the ego and killing the ego, but trust that the ego does serve a purpose. And the ego does have your best interest in mind. It's a little too one-sided, right? And so finding the balance between consciousness, higher self, ego, all these things to feel the full-on trust that you can have and then put out towards humanity. That's something that I think we're slowly working towards. But everything takes time, right? We talk about time like there's a time frame on everything, right? Like we're going to be healed by this time. We're going to find the meaning of life within this time. Is that really what we want? What is that going to solve? Like if you find the meaning of life, quote unquote, what does that give you? Peace of mind? Is like, oh, now I know that I'm supposed to, buy this house or get this, chicken or whatever the hell it is, whatever meaningless thing. Does that change anything about you? Not really, right? It's just that trust, the knowing, the gnosis, that you're doing something that you feel is right. You're following the path that you're intrinsically following, and all along the way, you're getting these beautiful messages that are like, hey, Adam, you're doing great. Thumbs up. Or, hey, you know what? You might want to take a left here instead of a right, But that's the trust that we need to find within ourselves. And then humanity.
You mentioned earlier that something big on your path right now is following your intuition.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that a lot of us feel that our current culture has sort of had us outsource our decision-making capabilities, and we have gotten really comfortable with being told what's right and wrong and being told what we're supposed to do and how we're supposed to act. And so reclaiming that trust in ourselves, that inside of us we hold the wisdom and the answers to what is going to really create the most happiness for us. That's what's really going to be the right path for us. Nobody else can tell us what's right or wrong, what should feel good and what shouldn't feel good.
Right.
Only by listening in to ourselves and getting really clear on what's going on in our own bodies and our own sensations can we really tell what is the right choice for us. And so much of this is about reclaiming that self-connection. And then the other piece to trust, like I said, sometimes even if we listen to ourselves and we make all the decisions in perfect alignment with exactly what we want, shit still happens sometimes.
Yes.
And so then the trust is being able to kind of zoom out into this greater awareness, this place where we're not in the ego and exactly what's happening at the moment. And this greater awareness that things are happening cyclically. Like we are in cycles. We're going to have cycles where we are feeling energized and aligned, and we're totally in integrity, and we're busting out the Journey of the Modern Yogi podcast, and we're doing it, right? And then there are going to come times when that's not the case.
Right.
And so, the trust is that we can go through these cycles and trust that we're going to come out on the other side. And I know that for me personally, as a female-bodied person with a womb who goes through these very cyclical ups and downs every month with my menstrual cycle, being able to tune into the beauty and the perfection of that the cycles, the different cycles of energy and inspiration and connection and pleasure that I have, has been so nourishing and it's just given me this sense of trust that I'm going to go through this experience and I can go deep into this experience right now that I'm having and appreciate it because I know that I'm not going to be stuck there. I know that this is a cycle.
Yes.
And that I'm going to come out on the other side.
Yes. So mentioned earlier you're from Texas. What part of Texas are you from?
So just outside of Dallas, there's a little town called Texarkana.
Yep, know it well. Yep, I grew up in Houston.
Wow.
And so we would go out to Michigan every year, maybe every other year, and we'd shoot up through Texarkana and go straight up. I talk a lot about my experience growing up in the South, and it's not something my parents by no means ever were proprietors of this verbiage, but it's just something that happened around a lot of the South, the Bible Belt, like you talked about, is that we were kind of taught to ignore our intuition. There's the male version of intuition, and I say male, not masculine, because a lot of males are taught this, not masculinity. It's trust your gut, right? You hear that a lot as a male growing up in the South, trust your gut, trust your gut. But all other intuition is taught to be feminine or demonized or witchery, like the sight, clairs, right? They're clairvoyance, clairaudience. Like you don't hear shit, you don't see shit. That's witchy stuff, right? And so growing up in a culture that doesn't embrace intuition and almost demonizes intuition, it took a lot for me to finally realize that I wasn't embracing that intuition and it wasn't embracing that intuitive moment. And so like I've really empathized a lot with that journey growing up in a place like that, but also it's not it's not a sentence by any means, right? It's not like, oh, I grew up in this atmosphere with this kind of upbringing, I guess I'm just screwed. No, like just like when you lose your consciousness and you lose your train of thought, or you actually follow your train of thought in a meditation, that doesn't ruin your meditation. That just gives you the idea of like, oh, I got to get back to my breath. My mind is traveling. I shouldn't think about my grocery list. My kids will be fine for another hour. I'll be fine. Get back here. Breath on top of your lip, right? And so those intuitive moments growing through that, don't throw it away, right? Don't say, throw your hands up and be like, ah, shit, I'm never going to get this. Work towards it, right? That's your chance to come back to your breath. And especially if we've been raised to not paying attention to our intuition, we've atrophied that, right? And so the moments we choose to now pay attention to our intuition, if it doesn't scream right away and say, hey, you should do that or you shouldn't do that, that doesn't mean just, again, throw it up and be like, ah, fuck, I'm screwed, walk away from it. Work on that intuition. When people switch from Western style medicines to plant medicines, say psilocybin microdosing to help with anxiety and depression, the first couple rounds of that dosing might not work as well as quote unquote the anxiety pills that the pharmacy gives. But it's because you've built up this chemical into your body that you've got to flush out so that the plant medicine can come in and do its job. So just as a broad brush stroke, just keep going at the job that you're doing, keep doing the work you're doing, because there's a lot that we have to unravel from the previous lineage of understandings that we have to embrace fully what we're working towards, whether it's sexuality, whether it's our intuition, the gnosis that we have, the spirituality that we have. Like there's all these things that we've basically been taught to demonize, so that when we finally become aware of them, just give it some time. Give it the patience and the love that it needs.
Adam, you're so right about the ways that our intuition has been demonized. And I just want to add in here, our intuition in the past has been demonized, and so is our sexuality and our self-expression. Basically, any way that we choose to show up that isn't approved by historically the government or the church. And so I can't emphasize enough, a lot of people feel like, why can't I just express myself? Why can't I be more in tune with my sexuality? Why can't I speak up my voice? And I can't emphasize enough that we are standing on hundreds and hundreds of years of people being killed and murdered and burned at the stake for being in tune with their bodies, for making pleasure sounds, for dancing naked in the woods, for being sexual, for having the gall to trust their inner voice and what they want rather than just doing exactly what they're told to do. And so this is something that we are, as a society reclaiming right now, but I just want everybody to know, to have so much compassion and so much awareness that, this is something that has been very real. It may not be happening right now, but the ramifications of that history have been passed down through our grandmothers and our mothers and us. And that's where, when we talk about cultural conditioning that leads to these things, that is the cultural conditioning that we're standing on and looking at, that's saying, don't trust yourself. Don't feel your sexuality. Don't feel pleasure Like, you are here to sit down, shut up, and be quiet and serve this greater authority.
Mm.
And I'm so, so grateful to be in this time where that is not the case anymore for
Right.
a lot of us. For a lot of us, what we're struggling with now is releasing the invisible chains of the past that are
Mm.
still holding us back.
Yes.
And so that is a big part of this work, is like recognizing where this stuff comes from, recognizing where this conditioning comes from, and saying, I'm not going to choose to act in accordance with
Mm-hmm.
that past of persecution and repression and violence. I'm going to choose to act from what's real here and now in my body, and I'm going to find a place of safety
Mm.
within myself, and I'm going to create places of safety where I can listen to my intuition, and I can trust myself, and I can trust that my desires are beautiful and my self-expression is beautiful, and that it's safe for me to connect sexually. It's safe for me to touch my body, and it's
Mm-hmm.
safe for me to have orgasms, and it's safe for me to connect with other people and express myself in relationship. It's safe for me to be honest about my feelings and
Mm.
my thoughts and my curiosities. And so in restoring trust, we're really restoring this feeling of lost safety.
Mm. Ah. Yes. There's a medium that I work with. I had on the show a while back. Her name's Holly. And she mentioned something to me when I first started working with her about the healing journeys, and had said that, when we do our healing journeys, when we start our healing path and we do our healing on our physical bodies and our emotional bodies, right? In this realm that we're in, we're not only healing ourselves, but we're healing our lineage. We're healing our family that never had the time, maybe the patience, maybe the knowing that they needed healing. Maybe they were too busy making sure they weren't being raided by outside villagers to be able to do healing, right? And so, but these people are around us always, our ancestors, our angels, our masters, our everybody, right? Our spirit guides. And so when you enter into your healing work, you're not only healing your physical self, but you're healing all the spirits around you, and you're giving them an opportunity to find healing and understanding and knowing that they didn't have time or the ability to. So you talk about, the witch trials, we talk about like all these, like slavery, all these crazy things that have happened in our lifetime, in our world, right? And I believe in reincarnation. That's, a thing that I do have I do feel knowingly, intrinsically, that I do reincarnate. And one of the concepts behind reincarnation is that we incarnate as every possible being, every possible situation. Sometimes I'm the father, sometimes I'm the mother, sometimes I'm a female sexual partner with another female, sometimes I'm a male sexual partner with another male, and vice versa, right? All these different things, but we experience everything. I was a king at one point in time. I was a queen. I was a pauper. I was probably, some kind of like villain of some sort, right? But we have to embrace and understand that to get that full human experience, right? And so you're doing this beautiful healing work for so many things that are around you, all these ethereal spirits that have this beautiful knowledge but never had the chance to do the healing work, right? And so that healing that you're doing is helping your ancestors heal from those witch trials, helping your ancestors heal from the slavery that might have happened, whether owning or being one, has helped heal from, being afraid and living in a cave and knowing that the sunlight brings life and energy, and that's our God. And then when it gets dark and it gets cold at night, we can't see stuff, so we have to light fires to make sure that the animals don't get around us. That's why we're afraid of the dark and we like the light, because the light is our God and the darkness is our devil, because things can kill us, right? It's when we start to understand this stuff has been systemically into us for thousands of years, if not longer, we can release a lot of that guilt, like you were talking about. Like, this isn't me, because, we're 80% water. Part of my water was probably in a whale's belly at one point in time. Part of my water was probably peed out of a dinosaur, right? There's like all these things of like these elements of world that's part of us and who we are. When we realize that we're part of everything, it kind of releases some of the pressure. It's like, I don't have to be the stoic human being that my parents raised me to be, because I'm everything, and I see that in you. And I see that in my dog, and I see that in the random person across the street that has a sign asking for money. I see that in the child that just asked me if I could grab the thing off the top shelf for him. I see myself in all these people, and that allows that love to be there and that healing to just really emanate through everything.
That's so beautiful, Adam. Yes, I love that you're speaking to the way that all of this work that we're doing and that so many of us are doing is not just for us now, but it's also to heal these generational traumas that our mothers and grandmothers and grandfathers have experienced. And I also just have to express so much gratitude to those who came before us and to those ancestors, because as much suffering as there has been along the way, they have literally been generation by generation setting us up to this exact moment where we now have the freedom and the ability to come out and express ourselves fully and authentically and honestly. And there's not this fear. I don't have a fear now in my body. Maybe there's some generational fear, but like I feel like I can go out and I can share these teachings, and how much gratitude I have that I can do that without a fear that I'm going to be burned.
Right. Yes.
Now in this time. And that work has been done by those who came before us. You know, I think that a lot of us hold a lot of resentment and anger at the way that things seem to be moving slowly and progress isn't fast enough. And I think it's very important for us to find that place of forgiveness and gratitude and awareness that, yes, we are showing up and we are doing this work so much right now, but so were those who came before us. We are building on the shoulders of giants. And now we get to stop and we get to think about, what is the lineage we want to create for those who come after us? What is the world we want to create for our children? And what does that look like? And something I've been really thinking about is, you know, what would it look like to create a world and this larger community where sexuality and pleasure was viewed as something sacred, and it was something that we were taught about as we grew up, and we were taught, you know, that it's okay to feel pleasure in our bodies, and that it's okay to love our bodies and explore and be curious and play with ourselves, and retaining the innocence and the beauty of what is so, so natural to being human, to being a mammalian, to being a conscious animal on this planet. And what would it look like to have teachers and elders and community leaders that, instead of trying to strip children and adolescents of all sexuality and teaching them that it's bad and that it's shameful and to repress it and that the only place you can learn about this is pornography, instead they were to say, you know, we are here and we are the adults and we are going to take responsibility for making sure that you have a safe world to explore your sexuality.
Yes.
Your sexuality is not for us. But you are a sexual being.
Yes.
And creating a society and a world that teaches us not only to accept that in ourselves, but to accept that in others, and then teaches us how to share that in a conscious way with others, that teaches us about consent and knowing what yes means in your body and knowing what no means in your body and knowing what it is to feel safe and respected with another person as you're going into a romantic relationship or into a sexual relationship. And you know, this is something that's becoming more and more important to me as I do this work, is what kind of lineage do I want to leave for my children?
Yeah.
And how do I want to raise my children in a way that allows them to embrace their sexuality?
Yes.
In a way that's going to be nourishing and allow them to be trusting themselves and trusting their body and their intuition.
Yep. There's a way of thinking that I've been talking about for a while, and it's not my idea by any means. It's just I love the concept and I love talking about it. And this adds a level to it, this conversation, that I didn't really put together in the beginning. And so the idea is that, so we now know so much about the human body, the somatic body. We know how to upregulate and downregulate our nervous system by breath work, light work, meditation, ecstatic dance, like all these things that we don't need anything but our own physical humanness to do. But we're still not taught it. We're not taught. We have to seek this knowledge out. Like I was probably in my late 30s before I found breath work and understood that I could do this all myself, and I didn't need pills, and I didn't need anxiety medicine. I didn't need marijuana. I could figure, I didn't need mushrooms. Oh my God. One of the biggest experiences I ever had was doing holotropic breath work, breathing for 90 minutes. And God damn, I've met things and went places I've never been on multiple grams of whatever hallucinogenic, right? Just from your own breath, right? But we have to seek this knowledge out. Why are we not taught this at a young age? And layering in the knowledge of sexuality, the acceptance of you have a body, that body can give you pleasure. We can't live in pleasure, but we're also not going to ignore the pleasure. How do we embrace the balance of pleasure? How do we embrace the balance of living with the knowledge that we're our own healers? We're self-healers, right? And so that is such a beautiful concept, and I hope that somebody is actioning that somewhere with young adults, young children. I don't know what the age would be to start at, but I don't think that there is an improper age as long as it's done with the biggest heart and in the right context, right? Learn about sex, learn about your body, learn about what makes you happy, learn about what doesn't make you happy, right? Sometimes we need to put things in places to understand if like that's a pleasurable place to put things or there's not a pleasurable place to put things, but I love that sharing of knowledge. How do we get this knowledge to the humans at what age, and how do we continuously teach this knowledge? I don't care who signed the Gettysburg Address at whatever the fuck date that was, right? That doesn't matter. How do you get yourself out of a panic attack, right? Let's learn that. Then once we have that baseline down, that we can operate as physical human beings, then let's layer in some of that knowledge, right? Let's get some of that astute education knowledge in there. But learn about the human being that you are first. God damn.
I feel you so much on this. And just to go into the question of when to start educating
right?
our children about sexuality, babies have been shown to touch themselves and touch their genitals on ultrasound in utero.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
So from the time that they're in the womb, we're already sexual beings. As soon as we're born, we're sexual beings. Children often are found to be masturbating or touching themselves in a different way.
Right.
With more exploration and curiosity and playful and innocence than we might think of it or ascribe to it today. But this is something that's very natural from the time of birth for children to do. And one of the biggest traumas that we're finding in the field of sexuality is that so many children are harshly reprimanded in some of their very first self-explorations through masturbation.
Right.
And so this can look like a parent walking in and seeing a child with their hand down their pants and just in a harsh tone, get your hands out of your pants, And for me, I had an experience whenever I was very, very young. One of the first experiences is that I can remember being in self-pleasure as a child. And it was my grandmother who came into the room and saw me and said, Destiny, don't you do that. That's bad. And I got in timeout and I was punished. And in a lot of the work that I've done, I can go back to that moment as a foundational moment that I decided and I made up about the world that it wasn't okay for me to touch myself and bring myself pleasure.
Right.
And there was so much unraveling to do. And that is a messaging that due to a lot of religious upbringing and just a lot of societal conditioning, that's very, very common in very many people. And so what I'm recommending for people, especially people who are having children or who would like to have children, is that when we're seeing this and discovering this, and we will, that we're bringing softness and we're bringing gentleness. And, maybe we're not quite ready for a world where we can just masturbate and touch ourselves wherever we are. But maybe what we can do is say, you can do that, but we need to do that in a private space. Or like,
Yes.
a way that I've heard it described is private time. Like you can, do you need private time right now? You can go have private time and you can play and explore and touch your body. It's your body.
Mm-hmm.
You can do with your
Yes.
body whatever you want to do with it.
Yes.
And so making that invitation to our younger generations and just really holding that as children are developing whatever they're feeling, whatever ways they want to play with their body, making sure that we're not creating shame around things that don't need shame.
Right.
Like anything that we are reprimanding our children for, we need to make sure that that's something we really don't want them, that's really for their safety.
Totally. It's like, don't chase your brother with the knife. Get your hands out of your pants. I'd rather you not chase your brother with a knife.
Yeah.
Have your hands on your pants in your own space, right? It's like there's levels of severity we need to look at
There's
here, right?
different levels, and we're evolving. We're evolving, and we're figuring out what is appropriate right now. But the biggest thing that is important about this is that these are all cultural things, and our culture has evolved on a set of principles that determine what is right and wrong and what's shameful and unshameful. And we really need to look at the history of where this conditioning comes from. Because a lot of this, if we look back, it's built on control, it's built on power, it's built on patriarchal systems that are meant to suppress women.
Yep.
And we get to decide for ourselves whether we're going to carry that into the future or whether it's time to create a new paradigm.
Yes. You've mentioned the word evolution a few times now, and I love that. There's a book that came out a couple years back called Sapiens. It's Yuval Noah Harari, I think his name is. Great book, and it talks about the evolution of humans, evolution of structures, political systems, just like evolutions of stuff, which is great. But he makes his point in there that really got my head thinking, and it has not left my head in a few years. But it's the concept is now, as human beings, we not only are aware of the concept of evolution, that we are evolving as beings, but we now know enough about evolution that we can influence evolution, right? And that to me blew my mind, right? Not only are we knowing that, basically we went from single cell organisms to multi-cell organisms. Like, we know now how that happened theoretically, but now we can influence the way that evolution happens because we've gained enough knowledge base around the concept of evolution, biology, how it works, how the chemistry works with it, and how we can influence that. So this is another whole layer of that. So we're evolving as a humanity, not as just beings. Now we're evolving as civilizations. We're evolving as states of mind, right? And a lot of people think that the next next steps of evolution are spiritual evolutions. So having this understanding that, not necessarily we don't want to demonize stuff. We have new information now that we didn't have then, right? When we were back then, we were very much raised by religion and organized religion, stuff like that. And part of that was demonizing things that we didn't understand. We're at a new place now where we understand that pleasure is okay, right? We got to find balance with pleasure. So taking that as the evolutionary step and now changing the way we're evolving humanity and adding that layer of conversation in, that somatic layer of how breath work works. That's the evolution that I love to see, the evolution of conversation, the evolution of information that's being given to the human being. It's like, why are we reinventing the wheel? Why do I have to figure out how this body works if these bodies have been around for thousands of years, right? There's nuances to your personality that make you very different, but there's also biological stuff that makes us very similar. So why do I have to figure out from ground zero what my body does? Why can't somebody fucking tell me that shit? Why can't there be a class? Why can't there be an ongoing study, right? Information that's given. So that's the evolution that I love to see. That's the impact of the knowledge of how the bodies and how the humans evolve that we should be, in my opinion, that's what we should be focusing on. That's the evolution that we should be working on, is the knowledge-based evolution.
Absolutely. And so many of the practices that you're mentioning, breath work, which is going to help us go from a state of anxiety and trigger and sort of this limbic response where we're in this very triggered emotional state. Doing breath work or just mindfulness practices, breathing deeply, focusing on one thing, or doing embodiment practices like ecstatic dance, like we did at the beginning of the podcast. These are all things that we could be teaching our children from the time that they're born, that we could be doing in school to teach them how to regulate their own nervous systems. And, you touched on earlier the use of anti-anxiety medications and antidepressant medications, and I wholeheartedly support people who are in a pivotal point in their life, in a crisis point, who need help to use those medications, but then to understand that those responses are things that we can regulate with our own bodies, that the medicine is inside of us. And I would go a step further from pleasure is okay to pleasure is medicine. And
Thank
pleasure
you.
is healing. And when we're going into breath work and we're connecting with our breath, what we're doing is we're getting out of a sympathetic nervous system response where our brain is in fight or flight and we think that a lion's about to eat us and we're in this trauma response, to getting into this place where we're relaxed, we're safe, we're trusting, we're in our bodies, everything is okay. And that, to me, that there's something very pleasurable about being in that state. And so breath work and embodiment, moving the energy. When we talk about embodiment practices, we're talking about feeling where tension is in our body, where is this emotion, where is this trigger in our body, and then we're moving it, we're expressing it, we're letting that fight or flight response that we're having complete itself. We're accepting that energy, we're surrendering to that energy, moving it so that it can transform into something pleasurable, so that it can transform into something that is more clear, where we're acting from a conscious place rather than a triggered, anxious, or depressed place. And these are all things that I also have struggled with in the past, and these are all methodologies that are found within Tantra and within sacred sexuality, but that are also like a very broad spectrum healing to anyone experiencing any kind of autonomic nervous system dysfunction, or triggered state or anxious state. And so really understanding that when we're in pleasure, what are we doing? We're releasing serotonin, we're releasing dopamine, we're releasing oxytocin, and these are all the chemicals that we're buying and paying money for people to give us pills to help regulate our nervous system. But we can release these chemicals through practices that take a little time to learn, that maybe someone needs to lead you through, but that are accessible to us, and of course, you can work with a teacher, you can work with a healer, you can work with someone who's going to lay out these practices for you, in a really structured way. And you can work with someone who's going to tell you, oh, this is what you're experiencing. Let's bring love to that. Let's go into one of these practices and embody that and get you into a state where you can love this part of yourself and you can regulate this part of your nervous system. But what I would love to see, Adam, is a world where we're not paying anybody to do these things, where these things are so known and so accessible and taught from such a young age that we can do this. This is how we live. Like, we know that when we're anxious, we can connect to our breath and bring love. Like, I always go back to this. This is such a big inspiration for me, thinking about the future generation. Like, what do we want for them? I want them to be able to hear somebody else make some negative comment about them and to be able to just like breathe, feel love for themselves, feel compassion, feel that it's not true. And then maybe like do a little skip and dance and then just go and be fine and not be traumatized for life and end up, needing all of this healing work and all of these things. And maybe that's a far off vision, I don't know. But that's truly what I want. And I think that any good teacher, any good healer, any good guru is going to teach you that you have every answer you need inside of yourself.
Yes.
You have all of the answers, you have all of the medicine, you have all of the wisdom inside yourself, and it's just about accessing that.
Goddamn, if there wasn't a beautiful way to end a podcast. That was just beautifully wrapped up. And I share that so much. I share that vision. I share that hope, because we have so much potential as humans, as beings, right? We have so much love, so many emotions to share, so much that we have yet to even unlock. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things to think about for me is like, not always what's next, but if we're this put together with this much trauma in our lives and we're already starting this healing path for maybe the next generations and generations to come, what kind of work can they do to help heal us, right? Did my great, 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 great grandfather think he was doing healing work? And now, like, but what kind of work was he doing? I'm 40 years, 50, 60 years now past him. What kind of work can I do that helps him? And what kind of work is my great, great, great grandkid's going to do? That's going to heal me. That's beautiful. I love that. Well, I'm going to put a lot of links in the show notes on how to get in touch with you. But do you want to give us a website or any ways to get in contact with you?
Absolutely, I would love to. So there are a couple of different ways that you guys can find me. There's my website, destinyholley.com, very simple. And you can find some different resources and stories, beautiful stories there. Of course, I'm on Instagram, also Destiny Holley with a little underscore at the end. And something that I'm really loving is running a Facebook group called the Sacred Pleasure Reclamation, and we do workshops and virtual retreats and online events there. And I would love to hear from anyone who this resonates with. And, I always love to remind people that you are always loved. Like, you have everything you need. You're always loved and you're never alone.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, sharing your wisdom, and this beautiful journey that you have, that you've already walked and that you're still walking, that you're going to be walking and continuing to just find beautiful information to share. I'm so excited to have met you and to have this conversation, and I very much look forward to future conversations and finding some ways to work together. I think that you have so much to offer humanity, and I'm so excited to see how that evolves. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Adam.
All right, we'll see you next time, love. Thank you so much for spending time with Destiny and I. I'll leave a lot of links in the show notes for you to get in contact with Destiny or find more information about the services that she offers and the information she's sharing. As always, thank you so much for joining. And if you like the podcast, please hit that subscribe button. Leave comments if you're feeling drawn. And if you need to reach out to me, find my email address and contact info in the show notes. You can also reach me at adamrealhealing.com. My new website is up and running. You'll listen to these podcasts and more. Thank you so much again. We'll see you next time. Obeisance and love.